Swifters, it's Prof G. Are you ready to add the ability for Snacktacular users to add rapturous reviews of their restaurant of choice? Well, in this lesson, we'll add a review struct, a review view, we'll create an interactive view where users can select a rating from 1 to 5 stars, and we'll organize our code into folder groups. Let's dig into that big learning. And so that you know where we're headed in this lesson, we're going to build this view that displays a spot name and address up top. This allows a user to enter a review title and a review, and we'll create a subview that shows a 5-star rating scheme here, where the user can tap a star and set their 1 to 5-star rating. Now, before we can do this, we need to create a data model to hold this data. We'll call the stuff that we add into a review a review struct. And to show you how we're going to eventually store this in Cloud Firestore, well, we already have a spot collection. There's one document for each restaurant or spot that's added to our app. And now we'll eventually add the ability for a spot document to have a collection of review documents for that spot. See how here we're looking at the spot document for Pino's Pizza? And in here, there's another collection named reviews. So each spot will have its own reviews collection that contain only those documents that are reviews for that spot. And if you click on any of the documents, you see that particular review. There are currently 3 reviews in here, and we can see with this one, we've got a title, the body of the review, the reviewer who posted it, the rating, and the date it was posted on. Now, we're not going to add the code to save this to the cloud in this lesson. We will get to that. But for now, we do need to create a model file, a new struct, which we'll call review, so that we can begin to build out the user interface to gather this data from the user, and this will eventually be the data that we save out to the cloud, so the review struct that we create now should match the structure of the data that you're seeing here. And just to show you, I can click on a different spot. I see it also has a reviews collection in here. This is for Shake Shack. They only have 1 review. So let's head back to Xcode and create a review struct. And actually, before we create any more files, let's organize the files in the Project Navigator. Now, there's no set way to organize your files, but many developers who write MVVM code will create folders for the models, view models, and views, so why don't we do that? Let's group our models in a model folder, so command-click on Spot and Place our 2 models. Then we can right-click on either of those files, and we'll select New Group from Selection. Now notice the 2 files that we selected are now indented below the folder. They're in the folder. The exposure triangle next to the folder is pointing downward. That means we can see the contents of this folder, and the 2 guys that are indented slightly to the right are in this folder. And now we can type a new name for this folder. I'll just call this Models. And then we can do the same command clicking on Spot View Model, Location Manager, and Place View Model. Then right-click and select Group from Selection, renaming this folder View Models. And we'll put Login View, List View, Spot Detail View, and Place Lookup View in a folder that we'll name Views. Cool. So now let's create our review model. We'll right-click on the spot file in the Models folder and select New File. This is a Swift file, and we'll call this Review, singular. Now we're going to need to import 2 libraries here. Import Firebase. This is needed to access authentication so that we can get the email address of whoever is posting this review. And we'll import Firebase Firestore Swift because that gives us access to the special document ID property wrapper. And we'll say struct capital R review, identifiable, codable, open and close curlies. We might add equitable later, but we'll wait for the error requiring that to show up so that we'll recognize it if you encounter it later on so that you know what to do when equitable is required. And then we'll set our first property, the ID property. The Firestore Swift library lets us use the @document ID property wrapper, followed by var ID : string ? This is the same technique we used when setting an ID property in our spot struct. This is going to eventually be a unique name provided by Cloud Firestore. In that unique name, this ID here is also going to be used as the name for a given review document. Then below this, we'll say var title, meaning the title of the review, equals empty string, var body, meaning the body of the review, equals empty string, var rating, we'll initially set this equal to 0, var reviewer equals empty string, and var posted on equals capital D date, open and close parens. Now, we used to have to jump through a bunch of hoops because we're using an Apple date here, and Apple's format is not the same as standard formats used on other computing platforms, but things are now easier in Cloud Firestore, and we'll see how to set this up in just a bit. And remember, next, in order to save things out to Cloud Firestore, we're going to create a computed property, which is a dictionary of key value pairs, because that's what Cloud Firestore saves to the cloud. So we'll say var dictionary, colon, and in square brackets, string colon capital A any, open and close curlies, and inside the curlies we'll say return, and between square brackets, the key value pairs, colon between the key and the value, and comma between each sets of pairs. And this is where we create the data that we're going to send out to Cloud Firestore. So between those square brackets, we'll say the string title, spelled just like the property, colon title, the title property, comma, the string body, colon body, comma, the string rating, colon rating, comma, the string reviewer, colon, and here's where things get interesting. Now we're going to populate this with the email of the user who's about to post this review, so the person that's logged into this app, and this will allow other people to see who posted that review. And we can get this automatically using the Firebase library. We can just say capital A auth dot lowercase auth open and close parens dot current user dot email. And notice that this could return possibly a nil. See the question mark in here? Although frankly, you should never see that because our app checks to make sure that a user is logged in before moving forward in the app. But we do need to deal with the possibility of the nil. So we'll put in double question marks for nil coalescing, followed by the empty string, which is what we would use if we got a nil in here, but that should never be the case. Then we'll add another comma and the string posted on, colon, and here we're going to say capital T timestamp. So this is going to stamp a date and time out to the cloud. This is a Cloud Firestore data type, and we're going to initialize this by selecting the timestamp option with date in here. Note that this wants us to pass in a capital D date, which is Apple's date type. So when we press return here, we'll just enter capital D date, open and close parens, and that will use the current date and time when this review is being posted. And that's it. Our review structure is created, and we automatically get the user's email and the current date for any review that's posted. Nice! So now let's create a review view that will hold the interface where we'll either gather new review data from the user or where we'll display an existing review if the user's clicked on one. So I'll right-click on the Place Lookup view, select New File. This is a SwiftUI file, and we'll call this ReviewView. And we should be able to see what we're building in the live preview on the right, but just as a reminder, this shows you what we're building in this lesson. Now, a review is associated with a spot. Remember, a spot is a restaurant, so the spot has its own reviews, so we'll need a spot variable here. So we'll start this under the struct definition line with @state var spot colon capital S spot. We've declared this, but we're not going to initialize this because we're going to pass in the spot when the user clicks on the review from the spot detail view. That's the view that we're coming from. And we're also going to need a variable to hold our review data. So we'll say @state var lowercase review colon uppercase R review. And we're eventually going to want to dismiss this view, so we'll need to create an @environment variable. In between the open and close parens, we'll type in \dismiss. Outside the parens, we'll say private var dismiss. You've used that a bunch of times already. And since we've added our variables that we've declared but not initialized, then we need to pass these into the preview provider. So down in the preview provider, I'm going to backspace over ReviewView and start to retype it, and we see that it now wants a spot and a review. So for the spot, I'm going to enter capital S spot to initialize a new spot, and between the parens, after name colon for the name property, I'm going to pass in the string Shake Shack, then comma, and I'm going to pass in the address colon property for the address property, and here I'm going to pass in the string 49 Boylston Street, Chestnut Hill, Massachusetts, 02467. And you can put anything in here, but I think these are about average size, so this gives us a good thing to consider when we're laying out our interface. And since we also need a review in here, I'm just going to pass in capital R review with open and close parens. That's just going to give us a blank review. Then we'll replace what's in the body with VStack open and close curlies, and inside we'll say text passing in spot.name and another text view passing in spot.address. And under the spot.name, I'm going to add the modifiers. How about .font, .title, .bold, multiline text alignment, .leading. That should make sure everything is left aligned. And we might not even need that because in the next line, I'm going to say .line limit passing in a 1. So that should limit this to be on a single line. And if we happen to go larger than a line, we'll just add an ellipses or 3 dots at the end of the text. And down below these two text views, I'll add a spacer to push these up to the top. And I'm going to want to left justify these two text fields, but I want to center what comes after this, the star ratings. So to get the alignment to change, what I'm going to do is I'm going to embed the two text fields in another VStack and set the alignment property in that VStack, the interior VStack, to dot leading. So I'm going to command click on the first text field and select embed in VStack. And then after the VStack, I'm going to add parens and the alignment parameter colon passing in dot leading. Now we don't see a change yet, and that's because this VStack is just as big as whatever's inside of it, and that's the text field. But watch what happens when I highlight, cut out the second text field, and paste it into that same VStack. So now the second text field defines the width of what the VStack is. So we can see both of these text fields pushed to the left. And there's another technique that we'll use to push the VStack flush all the way to the left, which is important because sometimes we might have a small name and address, and we want everything to be consistently on the left side of this view or the left side of your iPhone screen. So to do this, we'll make sure the VStack is framed in a frame that is the width of the device. So below the VStack's closing curly, we'll just say dot frame, and I'll start by typing max width. That's what we want. We see that highlights the max width parameter. We want that to be passed in. And we're going to pass in as the max width parameter dot infinity. And after that, we'll say comma and alignment colon dot leading. And whoa, everything is pushed flush left. In fact, too far left. I want to add some padding. So just above the frame, I'll say dot padding passing in dot horizontal. And this looks good. Now we're also going to want a toolbar up top, and we're going to get a navigation stack inherited from the view that we're coming from. So there's already a navigation stack on the spot detail view, or we'll create one before we present this as a sheet. So we don't want to add a second navigation stack inside of this view. But in order to get the navigation bar to show up in live preview, we do need to embed the preview provider inside of a navigation stack. So down on the preview provider, I'm going to command click on ReviewView. And remember, there's no embedded navigation stack, so I'm just going to say embed in VStack, and then I'll change VStack to navigation stack. And now when we add our toolbars to this page, they're going to show up in live preview. And in fact, let's add a navigation bar now. I want to do this below the outermost VStack. So I'm going to code fold to make sure that I'm starting in the right place. And below this, I'll say .toolbar, selecting the option with content, press return and return again for the trailing closure curlies. And then I'll enter toolbar item, hold down options so that I can select both the placement and content parameters. And for the placement parameter, since this is going to be a cancel button, I'll enter .cancellation action, which will put this in the leading position in iOS devices. Then tab over, press return for content curlies, and then I'll enter a button in here, select the option with a title and an action. The title will just be the string cancel, and the action will just be dismiss with open and close parens. Then I'm going to copy the whole toolbar item. I'm going to paste it below the current one, change the placement parameter to .navigation trailing, change the button string to save, and I'll add a to-do comment just above the dismiss that says add save code here. And now we've got our navigation toolbar with cancel and save showing up in live preview. Nice. Now below this innermost VStack and above the spacer, I'm going to add a text view above where the star ratings will go. So I'm going to enter a text view that says click to rate, setting this to bold and a font of title 2. And we should add some padding separating this. So below the text view, this one with the address, I'm going to add dot padding passing in dot bottom. And we'll enter a special interactive view for adding star ratings in just a bit. But for now, just to get a sense of how this will look, let's add an H stack. And inside we'll put in a for each, select an option with data, ID, and content. For the data, we'll enter a range, and that'll be 0, triple dot 4, and the ID will be \self, tab to content, press return, and we don't need the value passed in here, so we can just put an underscore in there. But for the code, we'll enter the image with a system name, passing in the string star.fill. And we've got 5 black stars in here. Let's make them red with .tint.red. No, yeah, I think we wanted foreground color here, not tint, but we'll fix that when we get to the interactive portion. But for now, let's make them bigger with .font, .large title, and below the stars, we'll enter the review title and body. So I'm going to pass in a text view, passing in the string review title. We're going to make this .bold, and I want to embed this in a VStack so that I can also add an alignment parameter to the VStack with .leading, just like the one above, so things will align left. And I want a space between this and the stars, so below the H stack, I'm going to add .padding of .bottom. And again, the same thing, we're not seeing the V-stack align flush left because there's only one element inside here and it's not very wide, and this particular V-stack is still center aligned in the V-stack that it's inside of. But we're going to see this change in just a minute. Below this, why don't we add a text field with the parameters title and text. The title should be the string title, and the text will be, this has got to be a binding value, so $review.title, and we'll modify this to .textfieldstyle.rounded border, and we'll give this our standard nice border. We use this a lot. We'll eventually create a reusable shortcut for this, but for now we'll just enter .overlay, selecting the option with just the content, press return for the curlies, and inside those curlies we'll say rounded rect with corner radius, not corner size, corner radius of 5. Below this we'll say .stroke, select the option with content and line width, hold down option so that we get both those parameters. My content will be .gray, the color, .opacity, passing in 0.5, and the line width will be 2. And below the V-stack, I'll also add .padding, .horizontal, and that looks better. And I'll also add .font of .title2, and below the text field, I'll enter another text view passing in the string review, setting this also to .bold, and below this I'll enter another text field, but this time select the option with title, text, and axis. And the title will just be the string review. Our text will be a binding property, $review.body, and the axis should be .vertical, which means that this is going to expand or scroll vertically if our review has more text in it than can be shown on screen. Now I'm also going to copy this whole overlay modifier bit that we created in the text field above and paste it in the text field below, but I want this review to take up the available space vertically, and here's how we can do that. So above the overlay, I'm going to add .frame, setting the max height property to .infinity. And look at that. We've got a big review box. This is just what we want, but we need to fix the alignment. So in the frame parens, after the .infinity, I'm going to say comma, and the alignment parameter here, I'm going to pass in .top leading. And we see that that moves the sample text to the upper left. Nice. The padding looks a little bit off, so let's fix that. So under the text field, I'm going to add .padding. That's a little too much. I don't necessarily want the vertical padding, so I'll just say .horizontal. Better. I want it a little bit smaller. So after the .horizontal, I'm going to say comma 6. That's looking good. So our layout looks good, but we do need to add this control in here so that we can click on the stars and adjust our rating for the review we're about to add, and this is how we'll do that. So we'll write a bit of code for this, and it makes sense for us to break this out as a separate view file. So I'll right-click on ReviewView, select New File. This is a new SwiftUI view, and let's call this Stars Selection View. Now, despite the name, we'll write this with a bit of flexibility so that it can be easily adapted with different looks and attributes. So instead of hard coding a bunch of these different attributes, we'll set them up as constants that you can easily change. Or in the case of the rating value, that's going to be a variable. The rating value is going to be a value that we pass in, and we're going to update that based on any tap the user makes on the star. So we're going to start off with @state var rating :int, but I'll put in a comment that says, change this to binding after the layout is tested. Now, binding values require you to pass in constants to the preview provider, and that won't allow us to change interactivity. So we'll keep this @state for now, just so that we can test things out. There is a technique around this, but it's extra code that really distracts us from our goal of building a cool restaurant review app, so we'll try to keep our eyes on the prize. Now, instead of hard coding the 5-star rating, we'll create a modifiable constant for this with let highest rating equals 5. Want a 10-star rating? Just change this value. Then we'll create an image that represents an unselected star, so if we have 4 or 5 stars selected, then this last one would be the unselected image, the 5th or unselected star. And we'll set this up with let unselected equals I image system name, and we'll pass in the string star. Want something else? Just change it here. And its complement will be below this with let selected equals image system name star.fill. Now you might want to adjust the size of these images, and you can with this constant let font F font equals large title. You might want a different fill color, so here we'll say let fill color color equals red. And we need a color for the unselected value, so we'll say let empty color color equal .gray. Now you can change these constants to alter the appearance of the view we're about to create, or for even more flexibility, you can change them to variables and then just pass in different parameters when calling this view. Now inside the body property, we'll create an H stack. In between the curlies, we'll say for each selecting the option with data, ID, and content. The data will be 1 triple dot highest rating, tab to ID, and this is the standard \self, tab to content, press return. Now we will name the constant that we're passing in here as we iterate through this range. So let's call this number. It'll just be an integer. And just to get a sense of what this will look like, inside, let's say selected, remember that's a constant with our star fill image, modified with .foreground color, and I should have used .foreground color in the previous view instead of .tint. That's why it wasn't showing up as red. And we'll pass in our value fill color. And we don't yet see the results because we need to pass in a rating to our star selection view in the preview provider. So we'll just backspace over this and we'll enter this with, how about a rating of 4? And we currently see 5 red stars, no interactivity, but we're about to change this, so hang on. First, let's make these images bigger. So after the for each close curlies, we'll say .font passing in font. And now what we really want to do is change the image based on the rating. So we can create a function for this. So just before the closing curly in the struct, we will say func show star, open and close parens, and we'll have an external and internal label with for space number :int. And we're going to return an image, so we'll write an arrow with capital I image, open and close curlies. And the code in here is ultra basic. We're going to simply say if number greater than rating, open and close curlies, return unselected, else open and close curlies, return selected. That's it. You could write this as a single line ternary operator if you want, but I think this is more legible. Then let's head back up here to the for each, and we're going to change the selected to a call to show star, passing in number, and look at this magic. Since we have a 4 as our default rating, we see 4 filled in stars and 1 unselected star which is not filled in. Nice! Now let's change that foreground color modifier to include a ternary operator. We'll pass in number less than or equal to rating, fill color. So if we're at or below the rating, it's filled in. Otherwise, empty color. Turn any value above the current rating into, in our case, gray. And now look at what we got in live preview. Niceness. 4 filled in stars, 1 gray star not filled in. Now let's make this bad boy interactive. Below the foreground color, we'll add an on tap gesture modifier, and between the curlies, we'll say rating equals number. So if an image is tapped, the number of that image from 1 to high rating is set. 5 in our case is the high rating. That becomes the current rating, and everything below and up to that value is shown as selected in the fill color. Otherwise, it's shown as unselected in the empty color. Try it out. And sweetness. Look at that. Good work. Now let's return to our review view and add this as a subview. So inside this H stack here with the for each that was showing filled stars, let's highlight this for each with its modifiers, delete it, and we'll replace this with a call to the view star selection view, that view we just created, and we're going to pass in review.rating. And since we have a rounded rect frame around our 2 text fields that the user can change, let's also put a rounded rect around the stars, since that's also an interactive element. So below the call to star selected view, we'll say .overlay, open and close curlies, rounded rectangle corner radius of 5 with .stroke with content and line width, and the content of .gray with .opacity of 0.5 and line width of 2. And this is actually showing the updates in the live preview. When the stars are being tapped, we didn't switch our state variable to the binding variable. We'll explore this more in the next lesson, but for now, we did a good job of creating our review model, the new struct, our first shot at the review view that we're looking at now, although we'll be refining this in bits and pieces over the next few lessons, and we have a cool interactive star tap control for ratings. Keep hacking, Swifter. There is more goodness to come.